The gunshot echoed through the dusty saloon, silencing every patron in a heartbeat. Zara Montgomery's life changed in that moment as her father, sprawled across the poker table, had just lost their last chance at freedom. The year was 1876, and in Elko, Nevada, debts were paid one way or another, even if it meant selling your own flesh and blood. "Your pa owes me $500, growled Victor Thornton, the wealthiest landowner in the county, as he tucked his revolver back into his holster. His eyes, cold as Nevada winter, shifted from Harold Montgomery's trembling form to his daughter. "And I aim to collect." Zara, 22 and fiercely independent despite the confines of frontier life, felt her blood run cold. She stood behind the bar where she worked, polishing glasses to help supplement her father's meager earnings from their struggling homestead. "Pa, what is he talking about?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. Harold couldn't meet her eyes. 3 years of drought had destroyed their crops, and his wife, Zara's mother, had succumbed to fever the previous winter. Gambling had become his escape, and now his debts had mounted beyond anything he could repay. Mr. Thornton has been generous with loans, Harold mumbled, staring at the worn wooden floor. "I thought this hand would turn our luck around." Thornton's laugh was brittle. "Your luck ran out months ago, Montgomery. Now you've got 2 options. I take your land, which ain't worth half what you owe me, or—" His eyes drifted back to Zara, making his meaning unmistakably clear. "You can't mean," Zara began, but Thornton cut her off. 5 years of service in my household. The debt would be considered paid in full." His thin smile revealed tobacco-stained teeth. "I need someone to manage my domestic affairs since Mrs. Thornton passed." The saloon remained silent as death. Everyone knew what domestic affairs meant in Thornton's household. 3 housekeepers in 2 years, all young women, all departed under mysterious circumstances. "I won't allow it," Zara declared, her knuckles white as she gripped the counter. "Ain't your choice, girl," Thornton replied. "Your pa signed papers last month putting you up as collateral, legal and binding." Harold's shoulders slumped further. "Zara, I never thought it would come to this." "I swear it." Before Zara could respond, the saloon doors swung open. The setting sun silhouetted a tall figure for a moment before he stepped inside, spurs jingling against the wooden floor. Dust covered his long coat, and his hat pulled low over his eyes had seen better days. A week's worth of stubble covered his jaw, but there was something in his posture that commanded attention. "Sounds like a mighty interesting conversation," the stranger said, his voice deep and measured as he approached the bar. "Whiskey, if you please, madam." Zara mechanically reached for a bottle, her hands trembling slightly. The stranger observed the tension in the room, taking note of Thornton's aggressive stance and Harold's defeated posture. "Mind your own affairs, cowboy," Thornton snapped. "This is private business." The stranger took his time, sipping his whiskey before responding. "In my experience, business conducted at gunpoint in a public establishment rarely qualifies as private." He turned to Harold. "How much do you owe, sir?" $500, Harold replied automatically, earning a sharp glare from Thornton. "Plus interest," Thornton added, "makes it closer to $750 now." The stranger nodded thoughtfully. "And you're planning to take this young lady as payment?" "She'll be treated well enough," Thornton said defensively. "Better than living in that falling-down shack with her drunkard father." "I see." The stranger finished his whiskey in one swallow, set the glass down, and turned fully toward Thornton. For the first time, everyone could see his face clearly: strong features, intelligent blue eyes, and a scar running along his left jawline. "I'd like to settle Mr. Montgomery's debt." A murmur ran through the saloon. Thornton's expression darkened. "This ain't your concern. $750, you said." The stranger reached inside his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He counted out gold coins and bills, placing them on the bar with deliberate precision. "I believe this covers it in full." Zara stared in disbelief. No ordinary cowboy carried that kind of money. Thornton's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Who the hell are you?" "Name's Zachary Quinn," he replied. "Just passing through." "I don't want your money," Thornton hissed. "The girl and I have an arrangement." The arrangement was for debt payment, Zachary said calmly. I'm paying the debt. Unless you're admitting your interest isn't actually in collecting what's owed, the challenge hung in the air. Several patrons shifted uncomfortably, aware of Thornton's reputation, but equally aware that forcing a woman into servitude when her debt was being offered payment would cross a line even by frontier standards. Thornton's hand twitched near his gun. You making trouble in my town, Quinn? Not at all, just conducting business. Zachary hadn't moved, but something in his stance suggested he was prepared for whatever came next. The money's on the table. Take it or leave it, but if you leave it, we both know this isn't about the debt anymore. The tension stretched until Sheriff Mills, who had been quietly nursing a beer in the corner, stood up. Take the money, Victor. Legal debts being paid legal ways. With a curse, Thornton snatched the money from the bar and stuffed it into his pocket. This ain't over, Montgomery, he snarled before stomping toward the door. He paused beside Zachary. You've made an enemy today, Quinn. Hope you're not planning on staying long. After Thornton departed, the saloon gradually returned to its normal hum of conversation. Harold approached Zachary with tears in his eyes. Sir, I don't know how to thank you. Zachary shook his head. No need for thanks. But I owe you $750 now, Harold said miserably. No, you don't. Zachary glanced at Zara, who was watching him with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. You owe me nothing. I don't understand, Harold stammered. Consider it a gift, Zachary said, though his eyes remained on Zara. Though I would appreciate a meal and perhaps some information about the territory, if you're willing. Zara stepped forward. Mr. Quinn, while I'm grateful for your intervention, I have to ask why a stranger would pay such an enormous sum for people he's never met. A small smile touched Zachary's lips. Let's just say I've seen what happens when Thornton gets his way. It's worth every dollar to prevent it. You know him? Harold asked. I know men like him, Zachary replied, his expression hardening momentarily. Too well. The least we can offer is dinner, Zara said, making a quick decision. I finish my shift in an hour. Our home isn't much, but you're welcome to join us. As she returned to her work, Zara couldn't help stealing glances at their mysterious benefactor. Zachary Quinn had positioned himself at a corner table, his back to the wall, watching the saloon entrance. Despite his trail-worn appearance, there was something distinctly different about him, a quiet confidence that spoke of education and purpose beyond the typical drifter. The Montgomery homestead sat 2 miles outside of Elko, a small, weather-beaten cabin with a barn that leaned precariously to one side. The drought had turned their once promising fields into a wasteland of cracked earth and withered crops. As they approached on horseback, Zara riding double with her father while Zachary followed on his chestnut gelding, she felt shame color her cheeks. It's not much, Harold said apologetically as they dismounted. It's a home, Zachary replied simply. That's worth more than most things in this world. Inside, Zara set about preparing a modest meal of beans, cornbread, and the last of their cured ham. Her father, temporarily emboldened by their narrow escape from disaster, brought out a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving. Special occasion, he insisted when Zara raised an eyebrow as they ate. Zachary shared carefully measured details about himself. He'd been born in Boston to a shipping family, educated back east, and had come west after the war. He'd spent the past 5 years working various jobs: ranch hand, scout for the army, occasional lawman. And now, Zara asked, finding herself increasingly curious about this man. Now I'm looking for something, he replied vaguely, or someone depending on how you look at it. Harold, already 3 drinks into the whiskey bottle, didn't notice the deliberate evasion, but Zara did. Before she could press further, her father launched into a rambling story about their arrival in Nevada 7 years earlier, full of hope for a new beginning. Martha, that's my late wife. God rest her soul, she believed in this place, Harold said, his eyes growing misty. Said the mountains reminded her of the stories her grandfather told about the old country. She sounds like a remarkable woman, Zachary commented. The finest, Harold agreed. Zara has her spirit, too much of it sometimes. Zara rolled her eyes but smiled fondly at her father. Someone has to keep things running when you're occupied elsewhere. The gentle rebuke sobered Harold momentarily. I've made a mess of things, haven't I? Your mother would be so disappointed. We'll manage, Pa, Zara assured him, though she had no idea how they would survive another season. Their supplies were low, and Harold's reputation in town meant credit was increasingly hard to come by. As the evening wore on, Harold eventually dozed off at the table. Zara and Zachary moved to the small porch, where a cool breeze offered relief from the lingering heat of the day. Stars blanketed the Nevada sky, brighter and more numerous than seemed possible. Thank you, Zara said after a comfortable silence. Not just for the money, but for how you handled it. You preserved my father's dignity, what little remains of it. Zachary nodded. You're close to him despite everything. He wasn't always like this, she explained, gazing out at the darkened landscape. Before my mother died, he was different, determined, hard-working. The drought broke something in him, and her death finished the job. Grief affects people differently, Zachary observed. Some find strength in it, others are consumed by it. You sound like you speak from experience. His expression became distant. I've had my share of losses. Is that why you're out here, far from Boston society? Zara asked directly. Running from grief, a brief smile touched his lips. Maybe not running from, but certainly looking for something beyond it. He turned to face her fully. What about you? Dreams beyond Elko? The question caught her off guard. Few people had ever asked what she wanted. I had planned to become a teacher, she admitted. I even corresponded with a women's college back east, but after Mother died, there was no money and Pa needed, well, someone needed to keep things together. You've done an admirable job from what I can see, Zara laughed softly. Our farm is failing, my father gambles away what little we have, and I was nearly sold to settle a debt. I'm not sure admirable is the word. You're still here, Zachary pointed out, still fighting. Many would have given up long ago. His observation warmed something inside her. Well, Montgomerys are stubborn that way. They talked until the moon rose high overhead, sharing stories that gradually revealed more of themselves than either had initially intended. Zachary spoke of his disillusionment with his family's expectations, his time serving in the war and his subsequent wandering. Zara shared memories of her mother, her love of books, and her determination to someday see the ocean. It's late, she finally said, standing reluctantly. You're welcome to stay in the barn. It's not much, but it's dry and there's clean hay. I've slept in far worse places, Zachary assured her. As he rose to leave, Zara impulsively touched his arm. Will you be moving on tomorrow? He hesitated. I hadn't decided. My business in the area might take some time. What business is that exactly? She pressed, sensing another evasion. Zachary's expression grew serious. It's better if I don't say too much just yet, but I promise it's nothing that would bring trouble to your door. After he left for the barn, Zara helped her father to bed before retiring to her own small room. Sleep eluded her as she replayed the day's events. Thornton's threat, Zachary's timely intervention, and the strange connection she felt to this educated Easterner turned cowboy. Her practical nature warned against trusting too quickly, but something about Zachary Quinn suggested he was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man in a world where such men were increasingly rare. Morning arrived with the crowing of their remaining rooster. Zara rose early, as was her habit, to begin the day's chores. To her surprise, she found Zachary already awake, repairing the broken pump at their well. Good morning, he called, wiping sweat from his brow. Hope you don't mind. Noticed this wasn't working properly yesterday. Not at all, she replied, bringing him a cup of coffee. Though you're not obligated to earn your keep, you've more than paid for your welcome. He accepted the coffee gratefully. Force of habit, idle hands and all that. Over breakfast, Harold appeared uncharacteristically motivated. Been thinking, Zara. Maybe it's time we tried something different with the South Field, that new drought-resistant wheat they're talking about over in California. Zara exchanged a glance with Zachary. That would be wonderful, Pa, but the seed costs money we don't have. Harold deflated slightly before rallying. Well, perhaps I could pick up some work in town. Blacksmith mentioned he could use help. That's a fine idea, Zachary said supportively. In fact, I might have a proposition that could benefit everyone. Both Montgomerys looked at him expectantly. I need a base of operations while I conduct my business in the area, he explained. Your barn with some minor repairs would serve perfectly. I'd pay a fair rent, of course, and help with the farm work when I'm here. We don't need charity, Zara said quietly. It's not charity, Zachary insisted. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. I get privacy and security for my belongings, you get additional income and help around the farm. Harold immediately brightened. Sounds reasonable to me. Zara wasn't entirely convinced, but she couldn't deny they desperately needed the money. And despite her reservations about Zachary's mysterious business, her instincts told her he could be trusted. All right, she agreed cautiously, but I want to be clear about expectations. We'll treat you as a paying boarder, not a savior or benefactor. Zachary nodded, respecting her pride. Understood completely. Over the next 2 weeks, the arrangement proved more beneficial than Zara had anticipated. Zachary spent most days making repairs around the property, fixing the roof, reinforcing the barn, and helping clear irrigation ditches in preparation for the next growing season. Harold, inspired by their boarder's work ethic, maintained his sobriety and secured part-time work with the blacksmith as planned. Zachary disappeared occasionally, sometimes for a full day, returning with supplies and little explanation beyond taking care of business. Zara noticed he always returned by nightfall, often bringing small luxuries they couldn't afford: coffee, sugar, a bolt of fabric, or books he thought she might enjoy. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in brilliant oranges and purples, Zara finally decided to press for answers. You've been here 2 weeks, she observed. Your business seems to involve a lot of waiting and watching. Zachary didn't immediately respond, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Mr. Quinn, she continued, while I appreciate everything you've done for us, I can't shake the feeling that your presence here is connected to Victor Thornton somehow. He turned to her then, his expression unreadable. Would it change things if it was? That depends on the nature of the connection, she replied honestly. Are you running from him or hunting him? A smile flickered across his face. Perceptive, aren't you? He sighed deeply. 3 years ago, my younger sister Rebecca came west to marry a man she'd been corresponding with, a rancher outside of Denver. When I didn't receive her regular letters for several months, I traveled to Colorado to investigate. Zara felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with the evening air. Her fiancé told me she'd changed her mind and returned east, Zachary continued, his voice growing tight. But when I contacted our family home, they hadn't seen or heard from her. I started asking questions around town. Eventually, I learned she'd been seen with a man matching Thornton's description, heading toward Nevada. You think he took her? Zara asked softly. I know he did, Zachary replied, his calm demeanor momentarily cracking to reveal a deep rage. Thornton wasn't always a saloon owner and moneylender. He ran a different kind of business back then, finding vulnerable women and selling them to mining camps and remote ranches where men outnumbered women 20-1. Zara gasped. And your sister? I've tracked him across 3 states, Zachary said, his voice steadying with effort. Each time I get close, he moves on. I've freed other women he's trafficked, but never found Rebecca. Elko is where the trail ends. That's why you intervened that day in the saloon, Zara realized. You recognized what he was doing, Zachary nodded grimly. I've seen his pattern too many times: create a debt that can't be repaid, then take payment in flesh. His eyes met hers directly. I couldn't let it happen again, not when I could stop it. Why not simply confront him? Or go to the sheriff, she asked. Sheriff Mills is in his pocket, Zachary explained. As for confronting him directly, Thornton is careful. He maintains just enough respectability to avoid suspicion, and he has men working for him who handle the messier aspects of his business. So you're gathering evidence and trying to locate a woman named Pearl who worked for him in Carson City. She might know what happened to Rebecca. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm close, Zara, I can feel it. The use of her given name, which he'd carefully avoided until now, underscored the personal nature of his confession. Zara found herself reaching for his hand, offering comfort she wasn't sure he would accept. To her surprise, he interlaced his fingers with hers. "I should have told you sooner." "If my presence puts you in danger, we were already in danger," she interrupted. "At least now we understand why." She squeezed his hand. "Let me help you." He looked startled. "This isn't your fight." "It became my fight when Thornton tried to take me," she countered. "And it seems to me that 4 eyes searching might be better than 2. Zachary studied her face as if seeing her anew. "You're remarkable, you know that." The compliment brought warmth to her cheeks. "I'm practical, and I have a personal interest in seeing Thornton face justice." Before he could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 riders appeared on the road to their property, moving at a purposeful pace. "Inside," Zachary said quietly, reaching for the rifle propped against the porch railing. "Wake your father and stay away from the windows." "Who are they?" Zara asked, already moving toward the door. "Thornton's men," he replied grimly. "Seems our time just ran out." Inside, Zara quickly roused her father, explaining the situation in hurried whispers. Harold, to her relief, remained clear-headed, retrieving his shotgun from beneath his bed without question. "Take position at the back window," Zachary instructed him. "If shooting starts, aim for the horses first. It'll give us more time if they can't pursue quickly." Zara retrieved her mother's old revolver from its hiding place in a kitchen cabinet. The weapon was small but well-maintained. "I know how to use this," she told Zachary when he raised an eyebrow. "Of course you do," he murmured, a hint of admiration in his voice. The riders stopped about 50 yards from the house. One man dismounted and stepped forward, his hands conspicuously away from his weapons. "Quinn," he called out, "Mr. Thornton wants a word. No need for this to get messy." Zachary positioned himself beside the front window, keeping out of sight. "What kind of word?" he shouted back. "The kind that involves a business proposition. He's willing to forget about your interference if you ride out tonight." Zachary's laugh held no humor. "And leave the Montgomerys unprotected. Not likely." The messenger conferred briefly with his companions before responding. "He says to bring the girl with you. She's part of the deal." Zara felt her blood run cold, but Zachary's expression remained controlled, calculating. "Tell Thornton I'll meet him," he called after a moment. "Neutral ground, the sheriff's office, 1 hour. Mr. Thornton prefers his own establishment." "I'm sure he does. Sheriff's office or nothing." Another hushed conference among the riders followed. Finally, the messenger nodded. 1 hour. Come alone." They watched as the men departed, maintaining their defensive positions until the riders disappeared from view. "You're not actually going, are you?" Zara demanded once they were certain the men had gone. "Of course I am," Zachary replied, checking his revolver methodically. "It's obviously a trap," Harold protested. "Obviously," Zachary agreed, "but it's also an opportunity. Thornton wouldn't have sent that invitation unless he feels threatened by my presence. He knows I'm looking for something." "Or someone," Zara added quietly. Zachary nodded. "While I'm occupying his attention, I need you to do something for me." He retrieved a folded paper from his coat pocket. "There's a woman working at the Silver Slipper on the edge of town, Maddie Wilson. Give her this note. She's been helping me gather information." "I'm coming with you to town," Zara insisted. "Absolutely not," both men said simultaneously. "Listen to me," she countered. "If I stay here alone with Pa, what's to stop Thornton from sending men back while you're occupied? We're safer together." Zachary looked ready to argue but paused, considering her point. "You're right," he conceded, "but you don't approach the sheriff's office. You deliver the note to Maddie and wait at the general store where there are witnesses." "And what about Pa?" Harold straightened his shoulders. "I can handle myself for a few hours. Besides, they won't expect the place to be empty. Might give me an advantage if they do come back." Zara wanted to protest, but she recognized the determination in her father's expression, a glimpse of the man he had been before grief and alcohol had claimed him. "We'll be quick," she promised, embracing him tightly. As they rode toward town, Zara on her father's aging mare alongside Zachary's gelding, the setting sun stretched their shadows across the dusty road. Neither spoke much, both absorbed in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. Elko's main street was bustling with its usual evening activity, miners and cowboys seeking entertainment after a long day's work, respectable citizens finishing their errands before nightfall, and the various entrepreneurs who catered to both groups. Zachary and Zara separated at the edge of town, with a plan to meet at the general store in 1 hour. The Silver Slipper occupied a garish 2-story building at the far end of town, its painted facade and red lanterns advertising its nature without subtlety. Zara hesitated momentarily before entering. She had never set foot in such an establishment before, and her presence would certainly raise eyebrows. A heavy-set woman with elaborately styled hair intercepted her just inside the door. "We don't hire girls from respectable families, honey," she said, not unkindly. "Run along home before someone sees you here." "I'm looking for Maddie Wilson," Zara replied, keeping her voice low. "I have a message from Zachary Quinn." The woman's expression changed immediately. "Upstairs, 3rd door on the left, make it quick." Zara navigated the crowded saloon floor, ignoring the curious stares from patrons. Upstairs, she found the indicated door and knocked softly. A young woman with tired eyes and fading blonde hair opened it cautiously. "Yes, Maddie Wilson." "I have a message from Zachary Quinn." Zara handed over the folded note. Maddie quickly pulled Zara inside, closing the door behind her. "You shouldn't be seen talking to me," she warned as she unfolded the paper. After reading it, her expression grew serious. "He's meeting with Thornton tonight." "At the sheriff's office," Zara confirmed. Maddie began gathering items hastily, stuffing them into a small satchel. "We need to hurry. Pearl arrived in town yesterday. I've been hiding her at my sister's place outside town. If Zach's forcing a confrontation tonight, she needs to be there." "Pearl, the woman who might know about Rebecca," Maddie paused her packing. "You know about that? Zachary told me everything," Zara explained. "I want to help." After a moment's assessment, Maddie nodded. "All right, we'll take the back stairs. Follow close and don't speak to anyone." Meanwhile, Zachary approached the sheriff's office with deliberate strides, alert to every movement in the shadows around him. Sheriff Mills waited outside, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Evening, Quinn," he greeted without warmth. "Thornton's already inside. Anyone else?" Zachary asked pointedly. Mills shook his head. "Just the two of you, like agreed, though I ain't happy about being dragged into whatever this is." "Sometimes taking a stand is uncomfortable, Sheriff," Zachary remarked as he climbed the steps, "but necessary." Inside, Victor Thornton sat behind the sheriff's desk as if he owned it, which, in a manner of speaking, he did. 2 glasses and a bottle of brandy were positioned before him. "Quinn," he acknowledged. "Drink? I'll pass," Zachary replied, remaining standing. "You wanted to talk." Thornton poured himself a generous portion. "You've been asking a lot of questions around my town, making people nervous, bad for business." "I'm looking for my sister," Zachary said directly. "Rebecca Quinn. 22 years old, last seen in your company near Carson City 3 years ago." If Thornton was surprised by the direct accusation, he didn't show it. "I meet a lot of people in my line of work, can't be expected to remember every face." "You'd remember hers," Zachary insisted. "Educated woman from a good Boston family, engaged to be married, disappeared on her way west." Thornton sipped his brandy contemplatively. "Even if I did recall such a woman, what makes you think I'd have anything to do with her disappearance?" "Because you've built a business trafficking women across the territory," Zachary replied, his voice hardening. "Because you tried to do the same thing to Zara Montgomery yesterday." "The Montgomery girl was a debt collection, nothing more," Thornton waved dismissively. "And these other allegations sounds like wild speculation from a desperate man." "I have witness statements from 3 women you've transported and sold," Zachary countered. "I have financial records showing payments to stage drivers who diverted female passengers to your associates. And by morning, I'll have testimony from Pearl Johnson about your operation in Carson City, including what happened to Rebecca." For the first time, Thornton's composure slipped. "Pearl's dead," he said flatly. "Consumption took her last winter." Zachary allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "Is that what your men told you?" Interesting, since I spoke with her just last week. She's very much alive and very eager to unburden her conscience. Outside the sheriff's office, Zara waited anxiously with Maddie and a thin, nervous woman she'd introduced as Pearl. They'd arrived minutes earlier, positioning themselves where they could observe the entrance without being easily spotted. "How long should we wait?" Zara whispered. "He'll signal us," Maddie replied. We don't move until her words were cut short by the sound of breaking glass and a muffled shout from inside the building. Without hesitation, Zara rushed forward, ignoring Maddie's attempt to hold her back. Inside, she found chaos. The sheriff's desk had been overturned and broken glass littered the floor. Zachary was struggling with Thornton, who had drawn a small derringer from his boot. Sheriff Mills stood frozen in the doorway, his hand hovering uncertainly near his gun. "Stop them," Zara demanded. Mills shook his head. "This ain't my fight." Zara didn't hesitate. She drew her mother's revolver and fired into the ceiling. The shot echoed deafeningly in the small room, freezing both men mid-struggle. "That's enough," she declared, her voice steadier than she felt. "Sheriff, I suggest you do your job and separate these men before someone gets killed." Mills finally moved, drawing his own weapon. "Both of you step back." Now, Thornton, breathing heavily, kept his derringer trained on Zachary. "This man is threatening me with false accusations. I want him arrested." "The accusations aren't false," Zara countered, "and we have a witness who can prove it." She turned toward the door. "Pearl, you can come in now." Pearl entered cautiously, her eyes never leaving Thornton. When he saw her, his face drained of color. "You're supposed to be dead," he whispered. "Sorry to disappoint," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "But I'm very much alive and ready to tell the truth about what you did to Rebecca Quinn and all the others." Sheriff Mills looked increasingly uncomfortable. "What's she talking about, Victor?" Before Thornton could respond, Zachary spoke. "Tell him, Pearl, tell him everything." Over the next hour, Pearl Johnson detailed Thornton's operation, how he identified vulnerable women traveling alone, created situations where they became indebted to him, and then transported them to remote locations where they were forced into prostitution or unwanted marriages. Rebecca Quinn was different, Pearl explained, her voice breaking. She fought back, tried to escape multiple times. Zachary's expression remained controlled, but Zara could see the tension in every line of his body. "What happened to her?" he asked quietly. Pearl couldn't meet his eyes. "Thornton sold her to a mine owner up in the mountains. Man named Hollister, had a reputation for breaking difficult women." "She's lying," Thornton interjected desperately. "I never met this Quinn woman." From her pocket, Pearl produced a small locket. "She gave me this before they took her. Asked me to get word to her brother if I ever got free." Zachary took the locket with trembling hands, opening it to reveal a miniature portrait of a young woman with his same blue eyes. "This was our mother's," he said softly. Sheriff Mills, who had been growing increasingly distressed throughout Pearl's testimony, finally straightened his shoulders. "Victor Thornton, I'm placing you under arrest pending investigation of these charges." "You can't be serious," Thornton exploded. "I own this town, I own you." "Not anymore," Mills replied, drawing his handcuffs, "and not for a long while, I expect." As the sheriff secured Thornton, Zachary turned to Pearl. "This man, Hollister, where can I find him?" "Mining camp called Eagle's Rest," she replied. "About 3 days' ride into the mountains northeast of here." "But it's been 3 years, Mr. Quinn. I don't know if I have to try," he interrupted. Zara stepped forward. "We have to try," she corrected. When Zachary began to protest, she continued, "This isn't negotiable. You've helped my family when we needed it most. I'm returning the favor." The following morning dawned clear and cool as preparations for the journey were completed. Harold, surprisingly supportive of his daughter's decision, helped pack supplies and offered his best rifle for their protection. "You bring her back safe," he instructed Zachary gruffly. "Both of them." "You have my word," Zachary promised. The journey to Eagle's Rest pushed both riders and horses to their limits. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous as they ascended into the mountains, following barely visible trails that wound through pine forests and across rocky ridges. Zachary remained focused, almost obsessively so, stopping only when absolutely necessary for rest. During their evening camps, Zara gradually drew out more of his story how he had idolized his younger sister, encouraged her education when their parents thought it unnecessary for a woman, and blamed himself for not accompanying her on her journey west. She was so excited about starting a new life, he recalled, staring into the campfire on their third night. Said the West represented freedom from society's constraints. I thought she was being romantic and naive. She wasn't entirely wrong, Zara observed. There is freedom here of a sort. Just also more danger than the novels suggest. Zachary's smile was tinged with sadness. Rebecca always preferred the novels with happy endings. Perhaps she'll still have one, Zara suggested gently. His eyes met hers across the flames. Thank you for coming with me. I'm not sure I could face this alone. The connection between them deepened with each passing mile, built on shared purpose and growing mutual respect. Zara found herself drawn not just to Zachary's obvious physical attributes, but to his unwavering moral compass and the gentleness that balanced his strength. For his part, Zachary increasingly admired Zara's resilience and sharp intellect, finding in her a partner rather than someone to protect. Eagle's Rest appeared before them on the fourth day, a collection of rough buildings clinging to the mountainside around the entrance to a silver mine. Activity had clearly diminished since the mine's heyday, with only a handful of men visible working the remaining claims. How do you want to handle this? Zara asked as they observed from a ridgeline. Directly, Zachary decided. These communities are small. Someone will remember Rebecca even after 3 years. They rode into the camp openly, attracting curious stares from the weathered miners. At the trading post, they found the owner a heavy-set man with a gray beard sorting supplies. Looking for Walter Hollister, Zachary announced without preamble. The shopkeeper assessed them carefully before responding. Hollister's been gone nearly 2 years now. Mine played out, he moved on. California, I heard. Zachary's disappointment was palpable. Did he have a woman with him? Dark hair, blue eyes, educated speech, something flickered in the man's expression. Might have. Hollister kept to himself mostly. He turned back to his inventory. Not my business who a man travels with. It is your business if she was held against her will, Zara interjected sharply, the shopkeeper's hands stilled. Don't know nothing about that, but… He hesitated, looking around to ensure they weren't overheard. There's a woman lives up by the creek, Widow Sullivan. Takes in washing for the camp. She might know something. They found the widow's cabin a mile upstream, a neat, modest structure with a vegetable garden and chickens scratching in the yard. A slender woman with prematurely gray hair was hanging laundry when they approached, Mrs. Sullivan. Zachary called, dismounting respectfully at a distance. She turned, her movements careful, almost wary. Yes, can I help you? I hope so. I'm looking for information about Walter Hollister and a woman who may have been with him. The widow's expression closed immediately. I don't gossip about my neighbors, past or present. Please, Zachary pressed. The woman I'm looking for is my sister, Rebecca Quinn. She was taken against her will 3 years ago. Mrs. Sullivan's eyes widened slightly. Quinn, you say? Yes, Rebecca Quinn from Boston. A long moment passed as the widow studied him intently, as if searching for something in his features. Finally, she nodded toward the cabin. You'd better come inside. The interior was humble but meticulously kept, with handmade curtains and a few books carefully arranged on a small shelf. Mrs. Sullivan gestured for them to sit at her table while she prepared tea. Your sister, she began cautiously, if she's who I think, arrived here about 3 years ago. Hollister claimed she was his wife, but anyone with eyes could see that wasn't true. He kept her isolated, but occasionally she'd come to the trading post when he needed supplies. Did you speak with her? Zachary asked, tension evident in every line of his body. The widow nodded. A few times, brief conversations while Hollister was occupied elsewhere. She was different from anyone I'd met, educated, refined, terribly unhappy. What happened to her? Zara asked when Zachary seemed unable to form the question. Mrs. Sullivan poured the tea with steady hands. There was an incident about 2 years back. Hollister had been drinking heavily. The mine was failing by then. The whole camp heard the fight. Next morning he claimed she'd run off during the night. She paused, her expression troubled. Nobody believed him, but nobody asked questions either. That's how it is up here. Zachary's face had gone pale. Are you saying he killed her? I'm saying I don't know, Mrs. Sullivan replied carefully. But 3 days after she supposedly ran off, I found this hidden in my laundry basket. She crossed to a small trunk, unlocked it, and removed a folded piece of paper. I've kept it safe, hoping someday the right person would come looking. With trembling hands, Zachary unfolded the note. His expression transformed as he read, hope replacing despair. She was alive, he whispered, planning to escape west to California. The note mentions a settlement called Richardson's Crossing, Mrs. Sullivan explained. It's another 3 days' journey from here. I always hoped she made it. They departed Eagle's Rest the following morning with renewed purpose, traveling west along trails that grew increasingly difficult to navigate. The terrain shifted from mountain forests to arid highlands, testing both their endurance and determination. On the second evening of this new leg of their journey, as they made camp beside a small stream, Zachary finally allowed himself to speak of hope. If she reached Richardson's Crossing, established a new identity. He mused, staring into the flames. She always was resourceful. From what you've told me, she sounds remarkably strong, Zara observed, passing him a cup of coffee. To endure what she did and still find the courage to escape. Like you, he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. Different circumstances, but the same spirit. The compliment warmed her more than the fire. I've had it easier than most. Even with our struggles, I've always had my father, our home. You've been the foundation holding that home together, Zachary countered. Don't diminish what you've accomplished. As night deepened around them, their conversation drifted to more personal territory, dreams deferred, hopes for the future, the unexpected path that had brought them together. When this is over, Zachary said hesitantly, what will you do? Return to Elko? Zara considered the question. I'm not sure Elko holds much for us anymore. Pa's been sober since you arrived, but you fear it won't last, he finished for her. She nodded. And even if it does, our farm is barely surviving. The drought has taken too much. You could still become a teacher, he suggested. It's not too late. Perhaps, she smiled softly. What about you? After you find Rebecca, Zachary was quiet for a long moment. For 3 years, finding her has been my only purpose. I haven't allowed myself to think beyond it. And now, she pressed gently. His gaze held hers across the fire. Now I find myself considering possibilities I hadn't imagined before. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken meaning. Finally, Zara broke the silence. We should rest. Tomorrow will be another long day. But as she settled into her bedroll, Zara found sleep elusive. Her mind filled with images of a future she had only just begun to envision, one that somehow, impossibly, included Zachary Quinn. Richardson's Crossing proved to be larger than they'd anticipated, a growing settlement that served as a trading hub for miners, ranchers, and travelers heading to California. Unlike many frontier towns, it boasted a school, a church, and several well-established businesses alongside the expected saloons and boarding houses. Where do we start? Zara wondered aloud as they rode down the main street. The post office, Zachary decided. If Rebecca settled here, she would have established mail service to maintain connections back east, possibly under an assumed name. The postmaster, a friendly man with spectacles perched on his nose, listened attentively to their inquiry. Quinn, you say? Don't recall anyone by that name. He scratched his chin thoughtfully. Course, we get lots of folks passing through who decide to stay. Some change their names, start fresh. Any other details might help narrow it down. She would have arrived about 2 years ago, Zachary explained. Well-educated, possibly took work as a teacher or clerk. The postmaster's expression brightened. Might be talking about Mrs. Morgan. Came here about that time, started teaching at our school last year. Proper Boston accent, always using big words. He chuckled. Married the blacksmith few months back. Nice fella, widowed with 2 young ones. Zachary's grip on the counter tightened. Where can we find her? Schoolhouse is just past the church, the postmaster directed. Classes should be letting out soon. They waited outside the small, whitewashed building, Zachary pacing anxiously while Zara tried to calm his nerves. When the door finally opened, releasing a stream of children into the yard, Zachary froze mid-step. A slender woman with dark hair neatly pinned beneath a modest hat emerged last, carrying books and papers. Even at a distance, the resemblance between brother and sister was unmistakable. "Rebecca," Zachary called, his voice catching. The woman looked up sharply, books tumbling from her grasp as she recognized him. For a moment she stood perfectly still, as if afraid he might vanish if she moved. Then with a cry she ran forward, throwing herself into his arms. "Zach, oh my God, Zach," she sobbed, clutching him tightly. "How did you find me? How is this possible?" He held her as if afraid she might disappear, his own tears falling freely. "I never stopped looking, not for a single day." Zara stepped back, giving the siblings their privacy as 3 years of separation dissolved in a flood of emotion. Eventually, Rebecca composed herself enough to notice Zara's presence. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I didn't mean to, please, don't apologize," Zara replied warmly. "This is a moment worth every tear." Rebecca insisted they come to her home, a comfortable cottage near the blacksmith shop where her husband Daniel worked. The reunion story unfolded gradually over coffee, with Rebecca filling in the missing pieces of her ordeal and eventual escape. "After Hollister realized I'd gone, he came looking," she explained. "I hid in the hills for days before joining a wagon train heading west, told them I was a widow seeking a fresh start." Her expression softened. "When I reached Richardson's Crossing, I was ill from exposure and exhaustion. Daniel found me collapsed outside his shop. He and his children nursed me back to health." "And you stayed," Zachary observed. Rebecca smiled, the happiness reaching her eyes. "I found something I never expected: a good man who valued me for my mind as well as my heart. A ready-made family who needed me, a community where I could use my education to make a difference." "You didn't write home," Zachary said, the unspoken question hanging between them. Rebecca's expression grew troubled. "I was afraid Hollister might track me through any correspondence. And after everything that happened," she looked down at her hands, "I was ashamed, afraid of how the family would see me after what I'd endured." "No one would have blamed you," Zachary assured her. "We only wanted you safe." "I know that now," she acknowledged. "But at the time, creating a new identity seemed the only way forward." She reached for his hand. "Can you forgive me for letting you believe I might be dead?" "There's nothing to forgive," he replied immediately. "You survived, that's all that matters." Later that evening, after Daniel returned home and was introduced to his brother-in-law, the conversation turned to Thornton and his operation. "He'll face justice," Zachary assured Rebecca. "I've made sure of it." "There were others," she said quietly, "women who didn't escape, who couldn't." "We know," Zara replied. "The authorities in Elko are building a case against him. Your testimony would strengthen it considerably." Rebecca exchanged a glance with her husband, who nodded supportively. "Then I'll provide it," she decided. No matter how difficult it might be to revisit those memories. As the evening progressed, Rebecca drew Zara aside while the men discussed the logistics of returning to Elko. "My brother seems different," she observed, "more at peace despite the circumstances." "I suspect you have something to do with that." Zara felt her cheeks warm. "We've only known each other a short time." "Sometimes that's all it takes," Rebecca replied with a knowing smile, "especially when two people share a common purpose and uncommon courage." "I admire him greatly," Zara admitted. "His determination, his principles." "And he clearly admires you," Rebecca noted. "I haven't seen him look at anyone that way before." Before Zara could respond, Zachary approached, his expression one of contentment she hadn't seen before. "Daniel has offered us rooms for as long as we wish to stay. We should rest before the journey back." That night, as Zara prepared for bed in the small guest room, a soft knock at the door revealed Zachary, his expression tentative. "I wanted to thank you," he said, "for everything. I couldn't have found her without you." "I didn't do much," Zara demurred, "just accompanied you on the journey." "You did more than that," he insisted. "You gave me hope when I was losing faith, courage when mine faltered." In the soft lamplight, the distance between them seemed both vast and insignificant. Zachary took a hesitant step forward. "When we return to Elko," he began, "I'd like to, that is, if you would consider." Zara closed the remaining distance between them. "Yes," she said simply. His smile lit his entire face. "You don't know what I was going to ask." "I believe I do," she replied, returning his smile, "and the answer is yes." He reached for her hand, bringing it gently to his lips. "Then I'll ask properly when the time is right." The return journey to Elko took 4 days, filled with plans and possibilities as their relationship deepened beyond their shared mission. Rebecca had agreed to travel with them to testify against Thornton, while Daniel would follow later with the children. They arrived to find significant changes in their absence. Sheriff Mills, empowered by Pearl Johnson's testimony and support from the territorial governor, had arrested not only Thornton but several of his associates. The investigation had expanded to include officials who had turned a blind eye to his activities for years. Harold Montgomery greeted his daughter with uncharacteristic sobriety and focus, proudly showing her the improvements he'd made to their property while she was away. "Been thinking," he told her as they walked the perimeter of their land. "Maybe it's time for a fresh start. Daniel mentioned there's land available near Richardson's Crossing, better rainfall there." Zara squeezed his arm affectionately. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Pa." In the days that followed, Rebecca's testimony alongside evidence Zachary had gathered over 3 years ensured Thornton would face serious charges in federal court. The case attracted attention throughout the territory, bringing other victims forward and unraveling similar operations in neighboring counties. One evening, as summer began its transition to autumn, Zachary invited Zara for a ride to a small lake outside town. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the water in brilliant gold and crimson, he turned to her with newfound certainty in his expression. "For 3 years I've been defined by a singular purpose," he began. "Finding Rebecca consumed every thought, directed every decision. Now that she's safe, I've been considering what comes next." "And what have you decided?" Zara asked, her heart quickening. "That some quests end only to reveal a greater journey waiting to begin." He took her hands in his. "Zara Montgomery, from the moment you stood up to Thornton in that saloon, I've admired your courage and spirit. During our journey to find Rebecca, that admiration grew into something deeper, something I never expected to find." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold ring. "This was my mother's. Rebecca insisted I should have it." He knelt before her. "I'm asking if you'll share your journey with mine as my wife, my partner, my heart's companion." Tears blurred Zara's vision as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she found her voice, it was clear and certain. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Their kiss sealed the promise, tender and profound, beneath the vast Nevada sky. The wedding took place that October in Richardson's Crossing, where both families had decided to build their future. The entire settlement turned out to celebrate Rebecca and Daniel with their children. Harold Montgomery sober and engaged in building a new home, and friends they'd made during their journey. Standing before the small church, Zachary took Zara's hands in his. "When I paid your father's debt that day, I told you that you owed me nothing," he reminded her softly. "I never imagined you would give me everything instead." "Not everything," she corrected with a smile, "just my heart. The rest our life together, our future will build that as equals." As they exchanged vows beneath autumn's golden light, both recognized that their story, like the West itself, was still unfolding. Page by page, each chapter richer than the last. In the spring of 1877, they welcomed their first child, a son they named Thomas, after Zara's grandfather. 2 years later, a daughter joined their family, her arrival coinciding with the completion of Richardson's Crossing's first proper school building, where Zara had accepted a teaching position alongside her sister-in-law. Harold Montgomery, revitalized by his fresh start, became an essential part of their extended family, his demons finally at rest as he helped raise his grandchildren and cultivate the prosperous farm they had established together. As for Victor Thornton, Justice was served when he was sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison, a landmark case that helped establish stronger protections for women throughout the West. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching their children play in the yard, Zachary reflected on the unlikely path that had brought them together. If someone had told me 6 years ago that my search for Rebecca would lead me to the greatest love of my life, I would have thought them mad, he mused, his arm around Zara's shoulders. She leaned into his embrace, her heart full. Sometimes the journey we think we're on is just the beginning of the one we're meant to take. Indeed, he agreed, kissing her softly, and I wouldn't change a single step that led us here. As the sun set behind the distant mountains, casting long shadows across their land, they remained together on the porch, watching twilight deepen into night not as captives of circumstance or obligation, but as partners who had chosen each other freely, bound by love rather than debt, their story still unfolding beneath the vast western sky.